G'day, hi and welcome. I got to get off my butt and get some work done. And I will, but first I got to make a video. Topics are kind of hitting me today, so I'm like, well, while I'm on a roll, I might as well go and check out my hat. Okay, slippy tires on a hot day. What? What do you talk about? The hotter the day, the better your tires grip, right? That's makes sense, right? Like, okay. Well, not necessarily. I'm going to tell you what I got on my tires right now. Right now I'm riding on a pair of Schenkos. I think it's Schenkos is what they're called. Sport touring tire on my sport bike. And the back tire is more the sport touring type like this. I want the next tire is going to be more, for the corners or whatever. But they're a hard compound. I got about 8,000 plus kilometers on these tires. Lots of tread still left on both the front and back. Again, I don't do burnouts and stuff like that. Yes, the hot weather does wear down your tires a lot faster. But here's the thing. When the pavement is cold on these specific sport touring tires, or tour tires in general, it's kind of like riding on marbles a bit. You feel like the tire's not fully gripped to the road because the road is cold. Now, as the road warms up, you can feel the bike feels a bit stickier, a little more planted. And not scary or anything like that, or that you're breaking traction all the time. But it feels that you can feel the coldness in the tires. That it just feels like it would break traction a little easier. My tread's working perfectly fine. Everything else is fine. Now, the other day, it was hot out. And I went out for a run, and it was marvelous. I mean, it was like the bike was mounted on rails, even with these harder compound tires, really sticking to the road. So the road is really hot at that point. But there was virtually no humidity. So perfect conditions. Perfect conditions. Hot day, sticky tires, no humidity. What more could you want, right? Bike's running proper temperature, everything like that. It's not nothing's overbearing. Everything's just right. And then there was another day last week, which we'll call it the day from a Canadian's point of view, a day from living in like a deep fryer from hell, because it was 35 degrees, 47 with the humidex. I didn't ride that day, but I think the next day was like 42 with the humidex or whatever. And the tires were hot and sticky, but because it was so humid, the road actually felt a little slick. Ooh, right? Now, I've noticed this phenomenon before, and it's something that I don't know if a lot of riders are aware of this. And I'm sure if you ride enough, you'll figure it out. But it's nice to be told in advance so that when it does happen, that you're not really, freaked out about this. But what happens is, I think, is a couple of things, especially on more, Quebec roads. Around the world, people drive on the roads. Around here, we drive on what's left, right? It's pretty divoty and pothole. And sometimes on the uneven surfaces, you'll get like some pavement, especially pavement that's been full of tar snakes and patches and stuff like that, or areas where it is hot enough that you actually have a slick of, like the two main tire grooves from the four-wheeled cages going down the road, particularly with a lot of tractor trailers going around like on a major highway. You'll see the two dark spots, right? And on that, if you ride in them, they're a little bit sticky, but when there's a bit of moisture on it, it slips. And I noticed this the other day that it just let go a little bit. Not enough to be scary or anything like that. On a shallow curve. And at the speed limit, whatever, I wasn't going crazy. And it was just the humidity on the road on top of that kind of, I guess you would say, slick of fresh rubber coming off the tires from the heat. So it's kind of a weird combination where you have, I guess you would say, a loose rubber. That's what she said. Anyway, so loose rubber, fresh planted on the road with a tad bit of humidity is the perfect recipe for slippage. And you'd think, okay, no, it's just probably some like oil or something on the road. But it's not, because you'll notice it on other areas where it's not like that as much either. It's just when the humidity really gets high, it's not quite like riding after a rainfall, but it's kind of like going out, like say, the morning after a rain and the pavement's still kind of wet in some areas. But it's like, like there's no water on there. It's just the surface. It's just slightly below the surface. It's almost exactly like that. If you know the analogy I'm making there. Once you're ridden on it a few times, you won't notice it in a straight line as much. You'll notice it if you come down to hard braking. You're probably going to walk up a little easier. So take it into account that humidity is going to it's going to affect your stopping distance. Just a little bit. Most people probably barely notice it, but you will notice it. Some bikes, especially with shorter wheelbases, are probably going to notice it more because you tend to notice condition changes more with a less forgiving wheelbase. But you also notice it on curves where you're holding your line and all of a sudden you slip over a bit. Sometimes it's the front, sometimes it's the back. Not enough to scare the crap out of you, but as long as you don't panic when it happens, just ride it out and then come back in. And I noticed this the other day, that the humidity actually made enough of a difference while riding. And mind you, most of the traction was perfect for most of it. But it did actually make the tires just a little bit slippy, even on a hot day. And I'm not sure if anybody's ever talked about this topic before, but it's one of those things that, like I've probably got over 130,000 miles, not kilometers, but miles of riding over the years on the roads. Even though I've, had like a 20-year hiatus from motorcycles on the road, only getting back on the road last year and this year. But I've already got 8,000 kilometers, which is about 5,000 miles between last year and this year. If my budget was a little bit better, I probably would have, be about a lot more. And it's near the end of July, so hopefully I'll still get my 200 runs in this year. I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm going to try for it. But the thing is that you find these conditions that it's things you have to experience, and nobody really thinks to talk about them. But also, too, when it's really humid, too, sometimes it affects your braking as well. You'll hear your brakes squeak a lot more in the humid. So you got a lot of things working against you here that is subtle, but it's there, and it's something to be mindful of. So I thought it would be a good topic for you guys to, because it's not something you really can get around. It's just you gotta take it into account. It's road conditions, right? You got to take it into account. Now, that said, most of you probably don't notice it when it happens, but when you do, take note of it so that you know what you're looking for. So that when you notice it again, then, okay, well, maybe it might make only a difference of a half-foot stopping distance or a foot or 2 feet, but that could mean a difference between smashing into something and not. Or where you ride in your lane. Let's say there's some guys, for some reason, they ride right on the line. Never ride on the line. And on a humid day, painted lines, you will know, even on a hot day, painted lines can sometimes be very slippy. Cold day, hot day. Painted lines should be avoided at all costs on any, there's always, if it's cold, it's slippy. If it's wet, it's slippy. If there's something on it, it's even slippier. Just avoid riding on the line. But on a hot day, maybe that'll just put you right to the line, and then it might be even you break traction on the dividing line. You don't want that. So knowing about it might keep you in a different lane position to account for that. Again, you might only slip over like an inch or so. You might not realize the breaking of traction, and you'll mostly notice it on like when you're turning. But that turn might make you go wide, and I've seen people do ridiculously wide turns on bikes that don't require that kind of radius, mainly due to bad riding habits. But maybe something like that will just put you over more than what you need to, and the next thing you know, you're too far over. You're too far over, and there could be oncoming traffic. There's almost no excuse to ever be crossing the line. There's just no excuse. But also to understand that if you're tight to the line and you break a little traction, then you hit the line, you might completely break traction. Thinking that, well, it's a hot, warm, dry summer day, that the road conditions are perfect, when they might not necessarily be. So just be mindful of it. It's kind of one of those things that I'm rediscovering again of, riding in conditions that, wind and I don't ride in the rain very much, but sometimes I get caught in the rain. riding on a really humid day is not like riding in drizzle, but there's a similarity to it. There's a similarity to it, just it's not as amplified. So I would treat it like you're driving in a rain or something when it's really humid. Like especially when you're going in the straight lines, no problem. But when you take your curves with that in mind. Take your use your braking with that in mind. Maybe brake a little bit earlier and a little bit softer and smoother so that you're not locking up or whatever. Because again, just that little extras, what you can't see or even feel, but sometimes you know when the pavement's really hot, you can't feel the humidity on it. But when you can pretty much cut the humidity with a knife, you know, when it's like 80, 100% humidity, yeah, it will affect your road conditions. So just keep that in mind. All right, anyway, don't forget to hit the like button and make sure to subscribe. Have yourselves a great day, eh?